First up, we are standing facing in towards a cable station with a low cable setup with the cables crossed over in front of the body. I personally call these crucifix raises, but you can call them whatever you like. What we're doing here is mid-delt into its fully shortened position overhead whilst putting it under a significant amount of tension. Already, this is one position that is quite undertrained in many people, because while we might access this range of motion on something like an overhead press with a barbell or a dumbbell, the weight isn't actively pulling you forwards, so it's not really challenging the mid-delt in that position or stimulating it to grow. So start by performing around 8 to 10 reps here, pushing it close to a failure point. Now, so far you're probably just like, okay, cool, this is nothing really fancy. You might even do this exercise some of the time, but here's where it gets interesting. Normally, when you perform a set in the gym, once you hit that fatigue point where you start to fail a little bit, you'd stop and rest before going again, which is completely fine to do. But if we look at this from a slightly deeper perspective, while you may have failed at the task of the exercise itself, and there'd be a fair degree of stimulation for muscle building, we haven't reached true muscular failure yet. So what we're going to do here is a mechanical advantage drop set to extend the set further and get even more stimulation out of this. We're not going to just drop the weight down as you would in a traditional drop set though, we're going to change our body position relative to the cable station. Also, pay attention to how I've switched my grips, so I'm no longer having the cables crossed over in front of my body. I grab onto the same side cable while facing in, then I step around and set myself up that way. It always catches people off guard at first, but it's the simplest way to get set up for this second exercise. So we've already hit a failure point in the first position, but by changing body position, we've put our shoulders into a range of motion where we're no longer training them in their fully shortened overhead position, but more so in their lengthened to mid-range positions. Most of your muscles are able to produce a lot more force and are a lot stronger in this lengthened to mid-range position, which is why we're able to extend the set further and get even more stimulus for muscle building. Quick question you might be thinking is, why don't we just start with this exercise if the muscle's able to produce more force and will potentially get more muscle building stimulation from this exercise? Well, because that will still leave that short overhead position untrained. Because of the mechanics of the cable, in this position here that you see us doing, as you raise your arms higher and higher overhead, the cables provide less and less active tension to the shoulder joint. So this ordering allows us to generate more effective stimulating reps for gains, and we're able to train the muscle through a larger range of motion in a very efficient way. Instead of doing several sets and several exercises, we're squishing it all into one condensed workout that'll take maybe 5 minutes at most. So to finish, once we start to hit a failure point on the ground here on our knees, we stand up. This serves two purposes. First, it allows for a little bit of extra momentum and assistance to be generated from other muscles of the body, which at this point is fine as it's helping us to get a few more reps out in a safe and controlled manner. And secondly, and most importantly, it's manipulating how the cable provides tension to our shoulders. It slightly deloads that bottom position and the top position, but it maximizes the tension when our arms are at roughly this 45-degree angle to our body, which is where the mid-delt is in its strongest position and most capable of still producing force. So as a result, we're able to get even more stimulation out of the shoulders, and by the end of this set, we can confidently say that we haven't just trained the mid-delt, but we've completely exhausted it through its entire contractile range of motion without having any significant gaps.